The people who demand the longest explanations from you are often the ones who had already decided not to understand you. That is the part nobody tells you. They let you keep talking. They watch you search for better words, a calmer tone, more proof, more context, more softness, and all the while nothing changes. Not because you failed to explain it well, but because explanation was never the price of peace. You were trying to earn understanding from someone who was far more interested in your uncertainty. I learned this late, later than I care to admit. There was a time in my life when I explained everything. If I said no, I explained why. If I changed my mind, I explained why. If I needed space, I explained why. If someone looked disappointed, I started building a little courtroom in the air, presenting evidence for my own right to exist as I was. Very exhausting work, very polite, very respectable, and quietly destructive. It did not look like weakness from the outside. It looked like kindness. It looked like maturity. It looked like being reasonable. That is why so many thoughtful people get trapped in it. They believe they are doing the noble thing by clarifying themselves. They believe if they are careful enough, fair enough, articulate enough, no one will misread them. But life does not work that way. Some people do not misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you because your confusion gives them access. If you keep explaining, they keep receiving one hidden message. This person can still be pulled back in. I remember a man I once knew, quiet fellow, smart, reliable, the sort of person everybody depended on because he rarely made a scene. One evening after work, he sat in his car outside his own apartment building for nearly half an hour. The engine was off. The groceries were in the back seat. Ice cream slowly losing its dignity. And he was not sitting there because of traffic or fatigue. He was rehearsing how to explain to someone upstairs why he could not attend yet another family obligation that weekend. He was 38 years old. A grown man, sitting in a dark car, building an argument for why he was tired. That image stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, because it was ordinary, so ordinary it almost disappears. That is how these habits ruin people, quietly, respectably, one over-explanation at a time. He went upstairs, he gave the speech, he was careful, he was gentle. He mentioned work, sleep, stress, timing, next week, maybe another day. He offered alternatives like a diplomat negotiating the end of a war, and the answer he received was not understanding. It was a colder version of disappointment wrapped in moral language. You know the type. We just thought you cared. It's fine, do what you want. You always have a reason. Always have a reason. Notice how that works. First, they train you to provide reasons. Then they use the existence of your reasons as evidence against you. Once you see that pattern, you begin to understand something unpleasant. Explanation is not always a bridge. Sometimes it is bait. And yet most people keep doing it. Why? Because over-explaining rarely begins in arrogance. It begins in fear, not loud fear, the quieter kind, the fear of being seen as selfish, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of losing approval, the fear that if you do not present your case properly, love will be withdrawn, respect will vanish, the room will go cold. So you talk. You add detail where one sentence would have been enough. You soften your own position before anyone challenges it. You apologize inside your explanation without using the word sorry. You rush to make the other person comfortable with a decision that was already yours to make. And here is the cruel little twist. The more you explain a boundary, the less solid it can sound. That shocks people when they first hear it. They think a long explanation makes them seem thoughtful. Often it makes them sound negotiable. Imagine someone says, "I cannot make it tonight." Clear, stable, done. Now imagine the same person says, "I'm so sorry, I really wanted to come, and I know this might sound bad, but I've had a stressful week, and I have not been sleeping properly, and my head is a bit all over the place, and I just think maybe tonight I should stay in, if that's okay." Which one sounds like a decision? Which one sounds like a door left slightly open for persuasion? Most people do not notice when they are doing this because the habit formed long before the words did. It usually starts in environments where simple truth was not safe enough. Homes where a plain no was seen as rebellion. Relationships where every preference had to be justified. Classrooms where being wrong felt humiliating. Workplaces where boundaries were interpreted as attitude. You learn slowly that it is better to pad your truth, better to package it, better to submit it for approval before you speak it aloud. Then one day you become an adult, but your nervous system is still waiting for permission. That is when over-explaining becomes a lifestyle. You see it in small things. Someone sends a message. You do not reply for 3 hours because you were busy. When you finally do reply, you include a miniature essay about meetings, traffic, laundry, low battery, and the general collapse of civilization. You are not sharing information. You are managing the possibility that somebody somewhere might briefly think poorly of you. A hard way to live. I had my own version of this. Mine hid itself inside dignity. I told myself I explained because I valued clarity, a fine excuse, elegant even. It allowed me to feel intelligent while doing something deeply self-abandoning. I was not merely communicating. I was pleading in polished language. Then came the day that changed it. Not a thunderclap, not some cinematic confrontation with rain on the windows and violins in the background. Life is usually less theatrical than that. Mine arrived in a conversation so ordinary it would have been easy to forget. Someone close to me questioned a decision I had made. A simple one, necessary, thought through. I had good reasons. Excellent reasons, in fact. I felt them rising in me immediately, lining up at the door of my mouth, ready to march out in tidy formation. And then something strange happened. I got tired before I even started. Not tired of them. Tired of the ritual. Tired of translating my inner life into legal documents. Tired of acting as though every personal decision required public review. So I said one sentence. I understand you feel differently, but this is what I'm doing. And then I stopped. No second paragraph, no nervous laughter, no bonus clarifications, no attempt to rescue the mood, just stillness. The silence that followed felt enormous. If you have spent years over-explaining, silence feels dangerous at first. You think something is missing. You think you have forgotten your lines. You think the bridge is collapsing because you are no longer frantically holding it up with words. But often the silence is simply truth standing on its own legs for the first time. The other person pushed back, of course. That is another thing no one mentions. When you stop playing your old role, people notice, especially the ones who benefited from it. They may call you cold, distant, changed, difficult. They may say they miss the old you, by which they usually mean the version of you that was easier to bend. It can feel cruel to hear that. But change nearly always sounds rude to people who were comfortable with your lack of boundaries. That evening I sat with the discomfort instead of rushing to fix it, a rare choice for me at the time. My body hated it. My mind kept trying to reopen the conversation and smooth it over. Send one more message, it said. Clarify your tone. Explain what you meant. Make sure they know you still care. Make sure they do not think you are harsh. I did not send the message. Nothing exploded. No empire fell. No sky cracked open. The relationship did not vanish overnight. In fact, something far more important happened. I saw very clearly who could respect a boundary without being handheld through it and who could not. That is when everything changed. Not because people suddenly became kinder. Some did. Some did not. The real change was internal. I began to notice how much of my exhaustion had come from carrying other people's reactions as if they were my responsibility. I had confused being understood with being safe. I had confused being approved of with being at peace. Those are not the same thing. You can be perfectly clear and still be disliked. You can be honest and still be misread. You can do the right thing and still disappoint somebody. Once that sinks in, a great deal of unnecessary talking begins to fall away. Here is where many people resist the lesson. They hear this and assume the answer is to become blunt, detached, careless. To stop explaining means to stop caring, they think. No, that is the lazy interpretation. The point is not to become hard. The point is to become clean. There is a difference. A clean sentence does not attack. It does not grovel either. It simply stands. I won't be able to do that. That does not work for me. I need some time. I've made my decision. Plain language, no performance. No hidden request to be forgiven for having a limit. The world becomes very revealing when you start speaking that way. Some people meet your clarity with respect. Even if they do not like the answer, they adjust. They ask once, perhaps twice, then they let you remain a whole person. Treasure these people. They are a quiet blessing. Others become strangely irritated by the absence of a long explanation. They poke at your sentence as though it owes them more. Why? But that doesn't make sense. You're being dramatic. Come on, give me the real reason. The real reason. What a delightful phrase. As if your first answer was a decoy and your inner life is public property. Sometimes people ask because they care. Sometimes they ask because they cannot tolerate limits they did not authorize. Wisdom lies in learning the difference. A useful question to ask yourself is this: am I explaining to create understanding, or am I explaining because I am afraid of the consequences of being misunderstood? That question cuts cleanly. If it is genuine understanding you seek, a brief explanation may be generous, healthy, even. In close relationships, clarity matters. It is good to let people know where you are coming from when it serves connection. But if you are explaining in hopes of preventing disapproval, that is usually not communication. That is self-protection wearing nice clothes. And it rarely works. People who have already decided to judge, you do not become fair because your paragraph was longer. People who benefit from your guilt do not become reasonable because your tone was softer. People committed to misunderstanding you are not waiting for the perfect wording. They are waiting for your confidence to crack. That is why the habit feels so hopeless. You keep searching for the right sentence when the real issue is the wrong audience. I think many gentle people know this in their bones. They just do not trust themselves enough to act on it. They worry that if they stop over-explaining, they will become selfish. But healthy people do not become selfish when they find their spine. They become legible. More honest. Less resentful. That last part matters. Over-explaining does not only drain you in the moment. It creates a private resentment that builds quietly over time. You say yes when you mean no, then explain your discomfort so sweetly that nobody notices the cost. You tolerate things too long because you want to seem fair. Then one day, after years of being understanding, you snap over something tiny. A late message, a casual request, a thoughtless comment. People act shocked. They say you changed overnight. You did not. You were leaking honesty for years. This is why simple truth is kinder than polished resentment. It arrives earlier. It gives everyone a real chance to adjust. It prevents those bitter little emotional debts that pile up when you keep betraying yourself in small, socially acceptable ways. Psychologically, this habit is tied to something very old in us. Human beings are built for belonging. Rejection stings because, at a primitive level, exclusion once meant danger. So when someone frowns at our boundary or goes cold after our honesty, the nervous system can react as though survival itself is under threat. That is why a simple sentence can feel physically hard to say. Your heart races. Your chest tightens. You start reaching for extra words like blankets. Nothing is wrong with you. Your body is trying to keep you safe, using an outdated map. The problem is that many adults still live by that map. They behave as though every awkward conversation is a cliff edge. Every disappointed person is a disaster. Every misunderstanding must be corrected immediately. No wonder they are exhausted. They are negotiating ordinary human friction as if it were a life-or-death event. It is not. Discomfort is not danger. Someone being unhappy with your boundary is not proof that your boundary is wrong. Silence after your honesty is not always a sign that you made a mistake. Sometimes it is just the sound of another person realizing they cannot steer you the way they used to. Sit with that a moment. There is a kind of dignity that only appears when you stop chasing immediate emotional clearance from everybody around you. You become steadier, less porous. You no longer hand your self-respect to the nearest reaction in the room, and rather unexpectedly, your relationships often improve. Not all of them. The shallow ones may wobble, the manipulative ones may protest, but the real ones breathe easier because they are finally dealing with a person instead of a performance. I have seen this happen with friends, with parents, with spouses, with adult children. The sentence changes, the dynamic changes, and suddenly everyone can feel where the edges are. Oddly enough, love tends to do better when it is not forced to crawl through a fog of hidden resentment and anxious over-clarification. There is freedom in being easy to understand. Not over-detailed, not endlessly accessible, clear. Suppose you need rest, say that. Suppose you do not want to lend money, say that. Suppose you no longer wish to continue a conversation that keeps turning cruel, say that. You do not need a tragedy in the background to justify a limit in the foreground. That alone would save many people years of quiet misery. And yes, there will be moments when you still explain. Of course there will. We are human, we care, we want to be fair. But the difference is this: explanation should be a choice, not a reflex. A gift, not a surrender. Something you offer from steadiness, not something dragged out of you by fear. When I stopped explaining myself to the wrong people, I discovered something almost embarrassing in its simplicity. The people who loved me with any real depth did not need a speech. And the people who demanded a speech were often impossible to satisfy anyway. There it was. An entire category of exhaustion, built on the fantasy that enough words can make everyone comfortable with your truth. They cannot. Your task is smaller than that and more honorable. Speak honestly. Speak kindly if you can. Briefly, when brief is enough. Let other people have their reactions without climbing inside them to rearrange the furniture. That part belongs to them. It is a strange feeling at first, letting someone misunderstand you a little. Most of us have spent years trying to prevent it at any cost. But if you never allow misunderstanding, you will end up over-editing your life until even you can no longer hear your own voice. That is too high a price for approval. The day I stopped explaining myself was not the day I stopped caring. It was the day I stopped auditioning for the right to be respected. And once you stop auditioning, something quiet returns to you. Your time, your energy, your tone, your evenings, your nervous system, even your face changes. Less strain around the eyes, less invisible pleading in the voice. You begin to move through the world like someone who knows that having a reason is enough, even when that reason remains private. That kind of peace does not make you louder. It makes you harder to shake. So if you have been exhausting yourself trying to make every choice acceptable, every boundary painless, every truth beautifully packaged, perhaps this is the moment to put down the script. Say what is true. Say only what is needed. And when the urge comes to add one more paragraph, just to keep the peace, pause. The peace you keep at the cost of yourself is rarely peace at all. Tell me honestly, have you ever caught yourself explaining far beyond the point of truth, simply because you were afraid of how the silence might feel?